so far. So welcome everyone to tonight's event for brand marketing, adapt strategies to thrive in today's economy with myself, president of AMA Boston, Jim Brown, president and founder of Tech Clarity, and Parna Sakar Basu, founder and CEO of Brand and Buzz Marketing. So as we get started, just a brief agenda for tonight. Over the next 5 minutes, we're going to do just a quick welcome, introductions, and then we're going to open it up to a few pre-fielded discussions, and then we'll open up to the audience for a short Q&A to answer any questions you have. Just a few guidelines to follow. Please keep your mic muted unless you're given the opportunity to speak. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them in the chat. If you have questions or thoughts you'd like to share with the group, you can also put those in the chat. Or if you'd like to network a little bit while we're chatting through tonight's questions, feel free to share a short intro in your LinkedIn link. The event is being recorded and will be distributed to everyone in the next few days. And feel free to take photos and share the event on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram using hashtag AMA Boston. So tonight's speakers, we have myself, I'll be moderating the event, and I am the president of AMA Boston. We have Jim Brown, president and founder of Tech Clarity, Inc. Jim also covers a digital enterprise, PLM, PDM, IoT, portfolio management, digital manufacturing, and other solutions for manufacturers. He founded Tech Clarity in 2002 and has over 30 years of industry experience in the manufacturing and software industries. We also have Parna Sakar Basu, who is the past VP of branding and sponsorship at AMA Boston. She's a tech evangelist, my apologies, serves as a strategic advisor to companies, a brand architect. Parna develops powerful programs to build and boost brands, corporate and individual, and also spotlights entrepreneurs and innovators and elevates them to industry thought leaders. So thank you both for joining tonight's event.
Great, thank you.
So let me go ahead and stop my screen share here and open the floor up to a few questions to get us started. First, let's start with your current role and expertise, starting with Parna. What do you do? How did you get into it? And how does it relate to brand marketing?
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. Hey, everybody. I do see a few familiar faces. So hello for being here. So I am the founder of Brand and Buzz Marketing, as Pat just mentioned. I started my company about 4 years ago, and we specialize in corporate marketing and thought leadership, but we primarily work with tech companies, helping build their, doing primarily their messaging and positioning, and in most cases, getting them ready for their fundraising and acquisition, whatever their business goals are. I kind of got into the tech industry by accident. When I came to this country, nobody would give me a job. So I knocked on doors, a lot of doors, and they all said, hey, what do you know about anything? You're from India. So that's where I began. And then to make a long story short, I started my corporate career at iRobot when nobody knew iRobot. They knew the Roomba. So that was kind of the beginning of my brand marketing career, where we had about 7 months to build the brand, get ready for the IPO. So if I got 3 hours of sleep over those 7 months, it was a lot. And since then, and of course, iRobot had an amazing IPO. And since then, I've been working in like different tech companies, and everywhere I've gone, it was either because they needed a brand refresh, they needed to reposition the company in a very short amount of time. And that's how I got into brand marketing and corporate marketing. It has been an amazing journey, and I look forward to talking to you guys about it today.
Great. I'll jump in then. It's Jim Brown with Tech Clarity, and my background actually is technical in a couple of different ways. I started as a mechanical engineer in school and then went out and started doing enterprise systems implementations with Anderson Consulting, the organization that is now Accenture today. And so really kind of had the technical side of programming and the technical side of engineering. And over time, I always noticed this huge disconnect between what the products did, regardless of what the product was, but what the product did and why should the customer care. And so I started just over 20 years ago now. Tech Clarity is an industry analyst firm, and our tagline is making the business value of technology clear. So, everybody's great at telling you what their technology does, but why does it matter to the business? Why does it matter to an executive? How is it going to move the needle on, on the top line or the bottom line, or if it's a nonprofit, furthering their objectives, those sorts of things. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years. And, from a brand marketing perspective, actually my last role in the software industry, I was a VP of marketing, product management first, and then a VP of marketing. And I used to use Analysts as a big sort of sounding board and form of input to our positioning, our brand marketing. And then as an analyst, I've now actually done that. People utilize us quite a bit to do that, and in a number of different roles. And I'm looking forward to kind of sharing why it might be important to you to use Analysts, and a couple of tips and at least one caution.
All right, well, Jim and Parna, thank you so much for sharing a bit more into your background so everyone can get to know you a little bit more. And to dive into tonight's conversation, I guess a great way to start off is asking, why is brand building important? Why should marketers care about it?
I can start, but before I do that, let me ask everybody here, what does branding mean to you? Would you guys can just raise your hand, or just add in chat what branding means to you. I'm just curious to see. Pat, I'll let you.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and maybe just start. To me, branding is the feeling that you associate with a name that's associated with a brand. When I think Nike, I think of fitness. I feel healthy when I buy their products, I guess. But let's go ahead and maybe moving on to another person in the group. I know, Bob, probably you might have a good answer for this.
Hey, Pat, you caught me totally off guard, but Parna, good question. I did a video, I know I have it on YouTube somewhere, that said something like branding is not necessarily who or what you say you are, it's what your audience says you are. So I guess similar to what Pat's saying, the feelings, emotion, passion that they have for you or not.
Yeah, good point. And again, we don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm just curious. So just share your thoughts in chat. But I'm going to start with branding is not, if I may, Pat. Oftentimes when we talk about branding, people say, oh, it's the website, it's the logo, it's the colors that you have. And often the conversation goes with, oh, yeah, of course, you can just tell a story and that's what really your brand is about. But like you said, Pat, brand is really, to me, brand is your whole reputation. It's how you're perceived, is why should people buy from you? And brand also, it's, to me, I look at it in two ways. One is the corporate brand, and there's also the individual brand. So if talking from a startup standpoint, for example, when founders are going up for fundraising, going to the VCs, people need to have like a market credibility. The VCs need to know that they know how to run a company, they are experts in their field. So similarly, I think, so the reputation of the company and also individuals, that's how I see brand, it's your reputation. And why do we need branding? I mean, think about it. It's you have to stand out. there's like zillions of companies out there. There's so many products. So how do you choose? And if I were to like just look at from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I think the last number that I saw, there are 582 million entrepreneurs in the world, and there are 32 million entrepreneurs in the US alone. So how to imagine all of their companies, their concepts that they're selling. So therefore, I feel that brand building is really important for a company to stand out, to connect with their audience, and essentially, as Jeff Bezos said, branding is what other people say about you when you're not in the room, and that is so very important, whether you're a company or you are a product or an individual. So that would be my take on branding. Jim?
Yeah, no, I love that. And, you know, I do think, and I agree a lot in what you're saying in terms of what branding is. And I think I'll maybe talk more about why is branding important. And I do most of what I do in the tech industry. Obviously, I'm a consumer in other industries, but from a professional perspective, it's the tech industry, and actually both in sort of manufacturing, hardware technology, but also more in the software technology side. But why is branding important? You know, when you are buying something, you know, if you're buying something that is, you know, not important to you, you know, it may not matter what the brand is, but you know, particularly when you are buying a technical product, some software, particularly enterprise software, this is a relationship. You're really investing in a partner and choosing a partner that you have to be able to trust with your business in a lot of cases, trust that they're going to stay in business, trust that they're going to be doing things that you're comfortable with in the long term. And so to me, branding is incredibly important, because that does play a big role in terms of technology decisions. You know, people will do an entire feature function selection on a series of, you know, on a giant spreadsheet. And a lot of times it comes down to who are they more comfortable with, and who they're more comfortable with often comes down to brand. Are they seen as a technology leader? Are they seen as somebody that is interested in their industry and solving problems for their industry and not just selling software? And then the other side, the softer side of brands, I just saw a very interesting announcement from one of our technology companies, actually a client of ours, that is donating a very large sum of money to a social cause, and you know, taking a bit of a political stand, and you know, they really have laid down, here's who we are, here's what we stand for, and it does matter. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Solving problems and creating massive impact, super important for brands. Carolina, I saw that you had also raised your hand.
No, I just wanted to like share my idea of branding, and I feel like branding is like the evolution of the core concept of marketing. The word of mouth is just like, is your name, no? Is your reputation, how people see you, how you were saying before, is what people and your consumers are saying about your brand. So that's, and your name, that's it.
Yeah, such a great point. Thank you for sharing. So moving on, when you are building out branding, or even, for example, you're doing something as massive as rebranding an entire company, where do you start? Where do you begin? How do you pave the path forward, not just for maybe your marketing team, but for the company as a whole?
Parna, I would defer to you to start on that one too. I've got a thought, but you're much more of the expert on that side of things.
Sure. So in most cases, of course, we do our due diligence, the market research, understand the culture of the company and all of that. But from a process standpoint, I really start with what is the positioning of the company? How do we want to position the company so that it stands out? And we can describe the brand in like most cases 3 to 5 words. It's so, to give you the example of AMA, Boston, when I started with you guys, as when I was brought in as a VP of brand marketing, And we said, okay, how are we going to brand AMA Boston locally? So we went through a very similar process that I would do with my clients. And the organization is positioned as the educational and networking hub for marketers. It sounds very simple, but the whole point of that positioning was to say, okay, if somebody asks us what's AMA Boston about, that's how we would describe the organization. And the programs that we put in place also supported the networking side and also the educational. So consider this as one of the educational sessions. So our whole goal as AMA Boston is to serve as a networking and educational hub for marketers like you guys. So that's kind of where I normally would begin. So the complexity starts when you work when you're branding or rebranding a company that has multiple products that have different target audiences. So when I started with iRobot, that was our biggest challenge because they had a whole consumer brand that everybody knew, and they had the military robots. So how do you brand the company, and how do you position the company? And our biggest challenge then was, so to make a long story short, the company was positioned as the robot company. It sounds very simple, but it was positioned as a robot company at a time when there was really no robot ecosystem. It was all about robotics, and robotics was more those big, huge machines in the manufacturing, the automotive manufacturing facilities. So that was robotics. And we were trying to build a whole ecosystem for robots for consumers. So the positioning of the company was the robot company. And for the consumer side, we talked about how these robots are saving time because the Roomba is cleaning the floor, which means that the moms, the dads, the professionals are out there, go party, go to work. So essentially the robots are, saving you time. And then from a military robot side, so these are the robots that are saving lives because they were the bomb detecting robots. That they would disengage the bomb. So therefore, the corporate positioning was the robot company, and it was about saving lives and saving time. And then when we went into the next layers, and we were doing the palette, the color palettes. Imagine the conversation, right? We cannot pick red because red is blood. We didn't want, consumers team wanted like vibrant colors. Well, we were selling to the government, so you couldn't really put vibrant colors. So that's those are the nuances that we go through. The company is positioned, then you do the messaging, which is right. Then you go through all the different aspects of branding, right? What's the website going to say? What's the message going to say? There's so many different audiences. So it's a very complex process, but I cannot imagine doing anything but what I do. It's a tough job, but I love it. And we've done so many rebrands and branding of companies, and oftentimes very, very quickly. And I always start with the positioning and the messaging, and then the rest flows from there.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And something that I'll pick up on, and the first thing that went into, sort of came into my head, came through in both of your examples, Parna, both with AMA and then also, with iRobot, is, what's the value? What's in it for the customer, right? And so to me, any branding effort really needs to start with what is the perception that you would like customers to have. Now, you also have to make sure that there's some integrity to that, and they're not going to peel back the covers and you say you're the company that does X, and truly you're anti-X, right? That's that's not going to fly. But it really does need to start with that sort of voice of the customer, the values of the customer. And in the case of where we work in the technology industry, that comes down to, in a lot of cases, the business value again. As we do, making the business value clear. What are the problems that are going to be solved? Parna, you mentioned saving time for the consumers and things like that, and networking for AMA. And it's what is the value that is going to come across. And it can't just be exactly the benefits or the value, right? Because it's a little bit more abstract in a lot of cases. But to me, if you don't have a solid handle on why your customer cares and what they care about, then it's a non-starter.
Totally.
Great points. Yeah.
Sorry, Pat. Jim, yes, so the customers play a huge role. So as we're doing the positioning, I kind of look at it as outside in versus inside out, because most of the time when we are working with the product team, the sales team, it's all about, like you were saying, the feature functions, and this is how we are different than the competitor. Seriously, nobody cares. I hate to say it, but nobody cares about your feature functions. So you got to look at it from outside in. How do you want the brand to be perceived? Like you were saying, it's not about your product, it's what it does, how is it making you feel? And today, especially now, like post-COVID, during COVID and now, brands are being held to a higher standard. Like consumers look at what a company is doing, what are they saying, what cause are they supporting? And I think it was a McKinsey survey. More than 60% of people who were surveyed, they claimed that how a brand responds to a crisis or a social cause, that really matters, because that drives a consumer's perception of whether they're going to do business with you, buy your product or not. So yeah, those values has to be looked at from outside in, for sure.
Yeah, and just one little footnote on the outside in. When I say customer, and back to Parna's example of iRobot, part of that's customer, but part of that's investor. So it's really who are you trying to, who is important to your success, and who are you trying to influence. And so that may be the financial market, as well as direct customers. Or if it's a nonprofit, then it could be your membership, right? So it's really when I it's customer, that's a generic term, right?
Totally agree. And the manifestation of the brand, how it manifests, is just as important. It's not the logo, it's not the website, it's not the messaging or the digital campaign. It's the collective thing. It's how are people reacting, the employees, what are they saying, their advocacy, the content that we're putting out, the ads that we're putting out, the conversations that we're having. So all of the pieces comes together to build that brand perception and the brand reputation. So every little piece matters. And it all needs to be cohesive, because no matter how a people interacts or comes to your brand or interacts with your brand, it all has to be nicely packaged so that the perception that it's a great brand, has a great culture with awesome products, has to come through. So the execution is just as important. And everybody is a brand ambassador.
100%. I think we can all agree that rebranding is not an overnight solution. It impacts every part of the business. So thanks for that, Parna, Jim. And now, Jim, I think this is more geared towards you. What do analysts look for as they listen to companies' pitches and messages when they're branding?
Yeah, and so it depends on the role and the relationship. There are some companies that we have very arm's length relationships with, and then there are other companies where we really are, very much a partner and helping them. And so we play different roles depending on what companies are looking for. So, if it's an established customer, we may be providing actually a lot of input to what they're talking about. If it's a new company that we're talking to, and maybe they're testing against a number of different analysts, then it might be a little bit different. But we really try and start with, are they understanding the value? Are they starting with that feature function? And we have the best left-handed widget that does X, Y, and Z. And oftentimes you find founders that will go out and, I saw this time and time again, actually, is part of the reason I founded the company, is I'd find these really, really intelligent founders that would find this problem. Like, if I could only solve this problem, the world would be a better place. Nobody solved this problem. And then they would go out and they would develop a solution that solves the problem. And then they would go out and they would tell everybody ad nauseum in detail what their solution does, and expect that these people are going to be smart enough to reverse engineer, why did you build that in the first place? And how is it going to add value by solving that problem? And so, you know, and it's so incredibly obvious. Tell them that you solved that problem. And if they don't care that you solved that problem, it doesn't matter that feature or function that's important that, you know, helps you solve that problem. So what we really look for, and we ask companies, is don't give us your analyst pitch, right? Give us your customer pitch. Give us your customer briefing, as if you think we're going to be buying from you, or if they're in fundraising mode, give us the pitch as you're going to give it to an investment, you know, a potential investor, you know, VC firm or whoever it may be. And, you know, we really are going to start looking for, what problems are you going to solve? How is that going to add value to the customer? And are you credible in the way that you say that that you're going to solve that? And, you know, and then the rest really just is how do you support that? How do you support that with your team? How do you support that with your, you know, the solutions that you're bringing to market? And then the overall perception of who you are and how you're, you know, how you stand behind that. So one of the companies I work with very closely, one of the things that we talk about is, you know, hey, this is not just a software provider. These people understand the business that, you know, and in this case, it's a lot about digital transformation, which, you know, may be a buzzword, but you know, there's a lot of reality to it. They understand digital transformation. They understand how manufacturers are changing the way they do business and changing their relationship with their customers. They understand that. And yes, they also offer solutions that help companies change their, you know, basically implement that and support that. But they're business people first and technologists second. And that's a lot of technology companies don't necessarily have that view, because they may be selling to IT. But when you're selling to business people, you have that's your brand. Your brand has to be, hey, we understand how to solve your problems credibly, and then the rest is how do you support it.
All right, everything to add on top of that before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Jim said. In fact, analysts, especially Jim, is part of my my validation ecosystem. Because so as we do the messaging, the positioning, we want to make sure that it's going to resonate. The way we want to talk about the company and the product it is going to resonate, because in addition to doing the branding and the messaging, it's our responsibility also to execute on it. We have to make sure that the analysts understand the story. We have to understand the website content is reflecting the same thing. The media understands how, you know, about the messaging that we put together. So analysts like Jim is a really good friend, because even before, like when I'm still working through the messaging, I have this small group of people I can say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. You know, am I off? Are we in the right direction? What do you think? And Jim will probably agree with it, because he has the industry information. He knows what other competitors are doing, but he's not going to tell me what the competitors are going to be doing, right? But he might say, hey, Parna, maybe you want to tweak this a little bit or go in this direction. So that's very, very helpful from an analyst standpoint, like for us. And then, of course, we build out the whole presentation, and then we do a whole facial pitch. And then from a messaging standpoint, because I also want, because of the different types of audience, that same message has to resonate, whether it's the media, the analysts, the customers, we have to also validate that. So when I'm simplifying the complex technology, I'll also run it by this small group of engineers to say, you know, because they'll say, okay, this makes sense. It doesn't make us look stupid, or kind of, what the hell are you thinking? Like, that's not, you know, that's too simplified. So analysts, like my small group of people there, that's where I go for validation before we even present it to the client, or we kind of do the rollout. So yes, I mean, I cannot imagine our world without the analysts, the influencers, the engineers who essentially help us validate everything that we do. And also making sure that when we are simplifying a complex concept, it doesn't come across as frou-frou marketing speak, but it's solid, but it makes the company look awesome because it has an awesome solution and not marketing speak. Does that make sense,
Great
Jim?
points.
Yeah, totally agree.
And to piggyback off that, how do marketing leaders, business leaders collaborate better with analysts in part of corporate branding?
I can take a first shot at that, Parna. I know you just mentioned you've got your sort of go-to list of people, and I'm honored to be on that. Thank you. The people that are, there to give validation, and I would say again, there's very different relationships that we have with companies. With Parna, it really is that if something doesn't look good, I'm not afraid to say, you know what, the emperor has no clothes, right? But there are other situations where I know that that's not really the role they're asking for. They really are, my feedback might actually be very indirect during the meeting, and then I may call up the person that I know is working on the branding that I didn't want to make look bad in front of their boss and say, hey, you know what, you've got a couple of flaws, right? And so there are people that you trust, at different levels. I think it's also about timing. There are certain people that you want to get involved as an analyst as input, right? What are the market drivers? What are the key things that you're seeing in the industry? And I love those conversations where, companies come in and say, hey, listen, here's what we're seeing in the industry. What do you see? And as an analyst, some analysts, I won't mention any brand names there, but their brand is we're all smarter than you, right? I don't like working with those people. I don't know anybody who likes to work with people that, their whole goal is to be smarter than you. Our view on it is we're not necessarily smarter. We just have a very different perspective because we're talking to, different entrepreneurs every day about what are they seeing in the market, what problems they're trying to solve, how are they going about it, what trends and shifts are they seeing? And so we just have this really broad overview of what's going on. So to me, I think it's really important to maybe touch base with analysts as you're going into the branding process to understand what are the market drivers, what are some of the things that are going on. And also you get some buy-in from them. So, this is my trick from being on the other side of the game. If you come and ask me up front what I should be talking about, and then you come back and tell me that you're talking about that, in a month or two later when you're done your branding exercise, do we notice? Yeah, we have egos. So anyway, and I think there's others though that really are more on that validation side. And then I think there are others that truly you're just rolling it out. The key is to know what your relationship is. And my one caution that I said I would offer is there are some analysts that you do not show your raw materials. Like when you're working with us, I tell people, show us the ugly slides. Like we don't want to see the pretty slides. We want to see the ugly ones. We want to see the work in process when you're like, we've got choice A and choice B. We don't know which one we like better, or here's what we don't like about choice B. And I may have an idea, right? Or I may say, no, I think actually it's perfect the way it is. But that's not a relationship that you can have with other analysts, because there are analysts out there that are coming up with vendor rankings and things like that. And you don't necessarily share the dirty laundry with them. You want to show them you understand who you are, what you're doing with confidence. And so there's those that you have that closer vulnerability with, if you will. And then there are others that you really are just, making sure to update. And my other little tip is, even if you've finished your final presentation and it's all pretty and ready to go, and you've got your branding and positioning ready, make some typos in it and make it look like it's not done yet, and let them think at least that they're getting their fingerprints on it. So that's my tip from doing it, but being on the other side of the fence. But don't do that with me. I would figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. So I'm going to say this, Jim, and I don't know if I was having this conversation, online conversation with a large company analyst relations person. And both of us were talking about how do we go through this education, especially with startups, that, oh, we can bring in an analyst, we're going to pay them, therefore they're going to say good things about us. And it's like saying, oh, journalists, of course, if you pay them, you know, they're going to write good things about us. So like we spend like so much of our time at the beginning educating them that they're influencers, and yes, you can do some paid campaigns with the analyst firms, not necessarily with the analysts, for leads or what have you. So Pat, I'm going to ask a question to Jim, right? Do you, like, I know we educate people a lot about how to work with analysts and how to work with the press and the influencers and so on. Do you ever get that sense when you talk to your clients that they think that just because, especially the larger firms, you pay a really big chunk of money to be associated with them, that influences how a report is written?
Yeah, and I think it again, it depends on the relationship with the analyst and who they are. I mean, there are analysts out there that are influencers that are, you know, the traditional pay for play, right? And unfortunately, I know companies where you know, and again, I was on the other side, so I know who they are.
Yep.
You could write a white paper that says, here's what my positioning is, here's what I do, and here's why it's the best thing in the world. Take your brand out and say, you know, you should go tell the market that this is the right thing to do. And basically they would put their name on it and publish it. I have no respect for that. But, you know, I understand that exists. You know, you have to find the people that have credibility with the market. And those people, you have to understand it's a give and take with them, and it's about credibility in a relationship. You know, you can educate them and try and explain to them why your positioning or your view or your approach is different and better. But you know, it's not a financial transaction, because they have to be credible to the people that are reading their research. And, you know, if they aren't, there's, you know, and there, you know, like I said, there are plenty out there that do that, the pay for play thing. But, you know who your audience is. You know, if that's all you want, then go for it. But if you want some real input, you know, if you want just somebody to give you lip service, oh yeah, everything you're doing great, you know, I wouldn't pay a lot for it. I, you know, don't think it's worth much value. But yeah, I think it's just about that individual relationship and who you're dealing with.
Awesome, great points both. So I'm going to open up the floor now to any questions from our audience members. Feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat. But if there aren't any questions, I'll just wrap up this conversation tonight with one final question. But does anyone have any questions tonight or any discussion points they want to go over? Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, great discussion. Great discussion, Jim and Parna. Thank you so much for all you've shared, your expertise and knowledge and experience tonight. We haven't necessarily talked about personal branding, and I don't want to necessarily push us into a direction that is not what the topic is supposed to be all about tonight, but I'm curious what you think about personal branding and how what you've talked about tonight relates to personal branding, and how perhaps the importance of personal branding seems to be increasing these days. Any thoughts on that topic, Parna or Jim, or both, please?
I can definitely talk to the personal branding, because we do what we call executive branding for founders. And when COVID hit, that was actually a piece of our business that just spiked like crazy. And the way we do, and I think I was telling Jim this, there was a point we were managing personal brand of 250 people simultaneously. Now the way so this is the way I address personal branding, or more like we call it executive branding, because we work primarily with founders and the C-suite, so to speak. I treat them exactly like I would do a corporate branding. So every individual, every executive that we work with, they have a specific positioning depending. So again, there's a whole process that we go through. So for example, one of our executives was positioned as the CX connoisseur, so customer engagement connoisseur. The reason being, as we went through the entire process, we realized that his biggest strength was around customer engagement. Customers loved him. He was very knowledgeable about it. So that was that. So his personal brand, his personal positioning was a CX connoisseur. So everything that he did, said, right, was around CX. So it was CX and digital transformation, CX and, how do you sell more? So everything was around that. And his signature program, his signature personal program is actually called The Science of CX. It's a podcast. So that's essentially how we look at individual positioning. So yes, and again, we have to make sure that just like a company, we build a corporate brand and everything has to flow collectively. That's essentially how we address executive branding or personal branding.
Great question, Bob. And then I think we have time for one more to wrap up this evening. That is from Janice Jens. What are the top branding mistakes startups make?
I'll say start making it all about them, and doing it in a vacuum. It's here's who we are. We're going to make a strong statement about that, and making a really strong statement that either nobody cares about or just doesn't resonate. The other thing I'll say is that one of the ways analysts can really help and give feedback is sometimes people, from their own internal thinking or just through lack of knowledge of really what's going on in the market can really step in it, honestly, right? And we've had situations where somebody was about to launch something and they're like, "Hey, here's our great new thing," and I'm like, there's somebody else that was 6 months ahead of you, and I don't know how you didn't see it, or there was a product that failed miserably, and I guess some of the gray hair does a good job of this. Is there's a product that failed miserably 15 years ago that had that name, and there are enough people out there that remember it. So I think some of the mistakes is just not getting that validation, not getting that input, and not just getting really in tune. And I think analysts can really help a lot with that.
I would agree. And I think just to jump on what Jim said, Janice, it's what we've seen is that they tend to focus a lot on the product and not necessarily on the big picture. So when we look at launching a company or building a brand, we always start with what's the purpose of the brand? Because as we said, purpose-driven brands are the ones that does very well, because people engage, people connect, and they know that there's a cause that they're supporting. So I think startups often don't think about it because your product is your baby. You've been working on it for so long, so you want to come and say, "Hey, look at my feature and functions, look at how awesome it is." So I think it's helping these startups to kind of step back and look at, this amazing product or solution that you come up with. How is it going to impact society or the environment? So kind of find the why, the purpose of the brand sometimes can be helpful.
Yeah, great question. So thank you so much, Jim. Thank you so much, Parna, for attending tonight's event. I just have a few slides to wrap up tonight, but I hope you all had a great time learning a bit more from these experts on brand marketing.
Great. Thank you for including me. I apologize. I'm going to get thrown out of our local library here. I'm on vacation, so I'm going to have to jump off, but thank you for including me. And Parna, I love learning from you.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. Talk soon. Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So this event was put on by AMA Boston. If you are unfamiliar with AMA Boston, we are the educational networking hub for marketers with over 400 members and growing. We typically have monthly events on the second Thursday of each month, a marketing mingle or online networking event, and educational panels on the third Thursday of every month. By becoming a member, you can exchange ideas about what's happening right now in marketing, expand your planning and execution skills, and build your management, leadership, and public speaking skills, as well as a lot more. You can also learn more about accelerating your career or get recognition from our programs and partners, and connect and discover other events in the area or online as it currently is, and connect with other marketers in the Boston area. We do have a few pricing structures for as low as $12.42 a month for professionals and $2.42 a month for students. You can learn more by heading to amaboston.org/become a member to join today. And if you have any questions about joining, feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. Once again, thank you all for attending tonight's event. Hope you all had a great time, and I will see you on the metaverse events coming up. Hope you all have a great